with me. Walk with me.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to tonight's City of Cedar Falls Committee of the Whole meeting for Monday, February 17th. I will now call this meeting to order. And roll call, please, Madam Clerk.
Schultz.
Here.
Latta.
Here.
Cruz.
Here.
Hawbaker.
Here.
Gienfield.
Here.
Crispin. Here. Dunn. Here. All members present.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Okay, we'll move to item number 1, the fiscal year 2026 budget presentation. And we have a presentation from Jennifer Rodenbeck. Quick background on this. The goal for the committee meeting is to give a recommendation for what we will actually be voting on at the regular city council meeting as the max levy. So, Jen, if you would like to.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, so we're here tonight to talk about the 2026 budget. Maybe right before I get started, though, just a shout out to some other members in our team in finance. You'll see a couple of them here, Lisa and Stacy, and for all their work on the budget. Paul's not here, but just a shout out to them. So as we all know, the budget can be kind of a long process on how we get here. And I think a lot of times it's because We consider things that are really part of the budget process, like the CIP, not just one hearing, this is the budget. So that's why for us, sometimes it seems like a long process. So one of the things we do in October and November is ask departments to submit their budget requests. In November and December, City Council holds goal-setting sessions where they might outline, things as it relates to TIF or cash reserves or debt that we want to issue. So that's kind of helpful to staff to give us some direction. December, we always have to do our TIF certifications. December and January, we're usually working on the CIP and getting that approved. January, right at the beginning of January, we get our valuations from the county so we can kind of start finalizing the revenue side of things. February, where we're at now, City Council holds a budget workshop session to set the proposed levy rate and the date of the special budget hearing, and those are all new under House File 718. So that was new last year. And then in March, the county sends a letter out to all taxpayers, which includes that rate that the council sets and that date of that special hearing. And again, those letters were part of the House File 718 that came out last year. And then in April, the council will need to hold 2 public hearings. One is that special time that you have to have that public hearing on the proposed rate. Again, that was a new requirement. And then the final hearing is actually adopting the budget. And then we have to have all that done by April 30th. So again, it seems like a long process, lots of steps along the way. So one of the things that, I think you've heard me say before, and probably no different this year, is obviously we have some challenges as we're working on the budget, and just listed some of them here, and I'll talk a little bit more about some of them later, but we're still in that phase out of the backfill funds from the state. We know we still have employee pay and benefit costs. Rollback, as we know, when that kind of goes up and down on residential, that kind of causes some tax burden shifts. Capital projects, we've been talking about that and increased costs of those. Quality of life projects, I know those are some things we talked about at goal setting this year and how we're going to fund those. And then, of course, House File 718 and the consolidated levy. I did want to just take a couple minutes to do the background. I know most of you know about House File 718, but I thought maybe just take a minute to just remind maybe the public out there about House File 718. So it was passed in 2023, kind of late in the legislative session, and signed by Governor Reynolds, and it had immediate impact on the budget a year ago. Fiscal year 25 continues to have impacts on the 26 budget that we're talking about tonight. There was various components of the bill, and it does impact all cities in Iowa. For Cedar Falls, one of the specific things was there was many levies that were eliminated. So for Cedar Falls, library and band levies were ones that were eliminated, and that was about $600,000 to support those activities. So for FY25 through 28, the new combined general fund levy, that's kind of a new phrase they're using, will be reduced depending on the city's growth for those fiscal years. So last year you heard me talk about we had to go down from $8.39 to $8.22. And again, that's based on the formula by the state. FY26, we'll have to reduce our rate from $8.22 to $8.06. One of the things we learned this year was we thought $8.10 was the floor. Like we thought when that came out, it talked about reducing down to 810. In fact, I think Councilmember Schultz, just in his hand the other day, had something from the League of Cities that showed that same thing too. Well, we find out this year that's not how that works. There is no floor to it. So we're down to 806. And so based on our valuations we got for FY26, we could have seen growth in our general fund of $789,000, but because that formula only could realize $438,000. Just again, many of you have seen this chart, but it's just kind of helpful for people to know when we talk about the general fund, what is the general fund, what's paid out of the general fund. So it's police, fire, parks, library, those are really the big ones that are paid out of that. So I think in terms of when people talk about the general fund and having less money, these are the services that can be impacted. One of the other things that House File 718 did was expanded some credits for homestead and military credits. So FY25 was the first year of that. So that was about $200,000 less in revenue that we got. For FY26, it's $354,000 that's taken off the valuation of the credits. Move the budget filing or deadline back to April 30th, but again, have this new requirement that started last year about a property tax statement being mailed out to every property owner by March 20th. The statement will show the proposed tax rate, the impact, and any explanation for increases. However, it really won't show the true impact. Last year, we talked a lot about, unfortunately last year, the letters just said if you had a $100,000 house, it stated 100,000, showed the tax rate, the rollback, and it showed last year that people were going to see a major decrease. And we stood here and kind of said, well, this is the true story that's really going to happen because there was countywide reassessment. This year, in an effort to fix that, they decided to put in the letter this year that it's assumed everyone has a 10% increase on their valuation. So your 100,000 house becomes 110. So the problem this year is it's going to be kind of the opposite effect, is that it's going to assume everybody had a 10% increase when there was no county reassessment. And I'll show later kind of that difference of what we would say is the true impact versus what a letter is going to say. And again, just wanted to give a little background about House File 718. We know we're going to be talking about that for a few years yet to come. So we always like to talk about how there's really three parts to how much people pay in their taxes. The first one is the valuation piece, rollback, and then what you guys have control over is the tax rate. So valuations, they're set by the county. So again, you guys don't have any control over that. Those are set by the county. And so this year, so assessed valuation, so the 100% value increased by 46 million or 1%. Now, we understand in even years, we're talking about FY26, it's an even year. Those are not normally reassessment years, so we wouldn't have expected a big jump in our assessed values. However, I did go back and look, and this is the lowest our assessed values grew since 1990, 1%. So that was probably a little bit of surprise. Now, keeping in mind, we also understand last year there was quite high of reassessment. So we kind of talked a lot about the averages like 20% last year. So we understand that last year there was high ones, and this year though it was a very low increase. So what does that mean? If I own a home or business, it just means that if it's worth 100,000, it's still going to be worth 100,000 on my valuation. So rollback factor, again, nothing you guys can control, but that's set by the state. So on commercial properties and industrial, the rollback will stay at 90%. That's the same it was at for FY25. And this is the part that when they passed this legislation back in 15, this is the part where we talk about backfill. The state promised to backfill what cities lost by having that rollback factor go down on commercial. So one of the things so we've talked about this backfill before. So in 15, those were the amounts that the state basically, again, the word backfilled back to us. They reimbursed us. So we lost that much in value, but then the state turned around and gave that to us. And then after FY17, that was not guaranteed anymore. So from 18 to 2022, what we did is said, hey, we're not going to rely on that. So if we get it, then we'll use it for a capital project. So that's what we've been doing. And then in 22, whoops, I got that right there. So in 22 is then they started this 8-year phase out. So they basically told us we're not going to backfill it anymore. You're on an 8-year phase out. So we lose about 82,000 a year from that. So you'll see for FY26, we're going to get about 328,000. We used to get about 600,000. As you can see, we're about halfway through that 8-year phase out. So again, one of the challenges we know we're still seeing. The other challenge was legislation 2023 was this business tax credit, where commercial property now, the first 150,000 is taxed like residential. So when a commercial property used to be 90% on their full value, now it's 47% for the first 150,000, and then it's 90% on the rest. So as of now, the state's backfilling that fund, and they've been calling it Backfill 2.0. This is the third year that we're planning on getting it, but I think we all get that probably what we're gonna see down the road is them phasing that out then as well, but so far that has not happened. So residential rollback, we talked about commercial. So this chart kind of shows that residential kind of going up and down, up and down. You'll see for FY26, it actually is increasing slightly to 47%. And again, this is how much of your house is taxed. So you may remember last year that it was the largest decrease in 1 year since 1979. So that's why you see that large decrease there. Now we did go back up slightly, but that reduction did help offset when last year there was increases in valuations of 20%. By that rollback going down, that helped offset that on a residential property. But unfortunately, when that rollback goes up and down, is what it does is it kind of shifts that tax burden. So when the rollback goes up on residential, more the tax burden goes on residential. When it goes down, it shifts over to commercial. And of course, as most of you know too, Cedar Falls is 74% residential. So we're always interested in what that residential rollback is doing. So we get to the part now that is really the thing that you guys have control over, and that's the tax rate that you want to establish. So the current year we're in, so last year we're working on the budget, the current year we're in, it was $11.86. What you see before you tonight is $12.50. And so it is an increase of 64 cents. Just to, I know a lot of times people are interested in this, just to kind of show where we fall in line with the top 20 cities in Iowa. You can see that we're 6th to the lowest rate at our current rate, $11.86. Even if it's at $12.50 right now, we'd still be kind of in the same position there. So you can see that we do, I think, take some pride in knowing that we're trying to be efficient and having a very reasonable tax rate. So what does all this mean when we say about a $12.50 rate? So what I have up here is if you look at a residential home, the left column is what we would say is the real story. That you take a $100,000 home, you take it times the rollback last year, you take it times last year's rate, and then you do the same for this year. That residential home on 100,000 would see $43 increase in their taxes, or 7.87%. The right column is what the letter's going to show, because remember, the letter's going to assume everybody had a 10% increase. So, as you can see, it's going to show, like, instead of just a little under 8, it's going to show 18% in the letters that go out. So again, kind of a challenge we have in terms of explaining those things and how the letter works. So on the commercial side, kind of a similar thing in that we would say, okay, on the left-hand column, commercial would see a 6% increase on 300,000, but the letter's going to show a 20% increase because, again, it's assuming you had a 10% increase on your valuation. So again, they're going to be confusing the letters, so we're going to have to try hard, obviously, to explain all that. So again, this is what's going to show on that letter. I don't know if anybody remembers the letter from last year, but it kind of showed for school, city, county, and it had these two lines and showed those rates and those examples. So you can see where that 18 and 20 is on the letters. Now again, I wanted to just kind of put this up here again about what we would say is the real impact on properties, because it kind of shows that shift that we talked about. So when residential rollback went up this year, you can see that residential properties will have a higher increase than commercial. Last year we were talking about the opposite because the residential went down so much. So one of the things that, again, that we're showing the $12.50 as the proposed rate to go in the letters. Just kind of wanted to go through, well, what is that $12.50? Where's that come from? What's included? What's not included? So obviously the first thing is salary increases. So in accordance with the union agreement and the additional market adjustment for that. We're looking at increased health insurance contribution, 14% that our consultant recommended. But we did not include any new staffing positions. So I think we thought just this probably wasn't the right year, knowing some of the challenges, that we didn't propose any new staffing positions. On the benefit side of things, so IPERS stays the same at 9.44%, and that's a formula that's shared between employee and employer. In terms of the 411 pension, fire and police, just so everyone knows, so Cedar Falls is one of the top, I believe it's 40 cities in Iowa that police and fire are paid under the 411 pension versus IPERS. And so as you can see, that pretty much stayed about the same. There was just a slight increase from 22.66 to 22.68%. But again, obviously that's still a property tax support. And again, the state sets those rates. We don't have any control over that. Other things that are incorporated into the budget is when I was here talking about the CIP, we talked about it's a 5-year planning document, but one of the things is we'll take that 26 column and then put it in the budget. So all those things in the 26 column are in the budget as it stands right now. And I just wanted to point out 2 of the major things that are funded by general fund dollars on the CIP. So you may recall that came back to give the extra $900,000 to the high school pool. So $225,000 of that was coming out of general fund. And then the other thing on the CIP is the extra $500,000 that council discussed at goal setting to designate towards a capital project. So those are probably the 2 big things on the CIP that would have had an effect on the $12.50 rate. The other thing for hotel motel tax revenue is we budgeted for $1.2 million in FY25. We're budgeting for $1.4 million in FY26. And the current year we're in, FY25, we're estimating extra funds that we're going to receive for hotel motel. So what we did to help, again, lower the rate is not levy the full $500,000. We were going to take that $200,000 of extra hotel motel in this year, put it towards that project, so we're really only levying $300,000. So really only $300,000 had an impact on the $12.50 rate. Other thing that's in the budget is we've had conversation over the last few years is about EMA. So in this budget, the costs actually only went up slightly. It was less than 1% increase that they provided to us as an estimate. However, in the current year we're in, we received a $184,000 refund for the FY24 costs. So what this budget is proposing is using half of that refund to help offset the costs in FY26 and save the other half for FY27 because we're not sure what's going to happen in FY27. So that's, again, helped offset some of those costs for EMA. Outside agency funding, continue to have some of that under our community betterment and economic development funding, our health trust funding, the band. Last year, you may recall, the band levy was removed, but the council talked at goal setting that continued to fund the band at $35,000. So that's in there. Met Transit asked for a 3% increase. However, we did not include that 3% increase in the budget. We're budgeting for just the FY25 amount. We did not put in there their 3% that they asked for. I think, again, looking forward to challenges on the revenue side, we know backfill is going to continue to be phased out. Are they going to continue to fund backfill 2.0? We know we'll have to do something with our rate again next year for FY28 because there's no floor to the reduction. But what are some things that we might still have as tools right now? Well, we're saving up capital replacement funds for capital projects. Continue to save a portion of the TIF release for future economic development. We do have some capacity in our trust and agency levy, but not very much. We really used a lot of that up this year. And you may recall we used to talk about a 27-cent emergency levy, but that was taken away by House File 718, so that's not a tool for us anymore. Just if you're interested, a year ago, we had 1.3 million capacity in our trust and agency levy. This year we have 200,000. So again, nervous about kind of the future and how does that look next year then in terms of we don't have a whole lot of capacity to work with on our levies. So for tonight, really just kind of wanted to go over what was included, what's not included, just a little bit on the schedule. So we're here tonight to talk about that proposed tax rate and the special meeting time and date. And so you'll see on the council agenda tonight is that resolution. We will have to provide to the county then that date of that meeting and that rate to be included in the letters that go out. We'll have to publish that notice for the special meeting and proposed rate in March 20th. Hold the special meeting at 5:15, because again, it has to be a special council meeting on April 7th. And then we'll have the actual final hearing on April 21st to make our April 30th deadline. I know one of the things that the mayor's already been talking about is the next council meeting, having maybe more discussion at committee about any, I think the mayor was going to bring back maybe some proposed changes to the budget as it stands right now. So for tonight, what really staff's asking is for the committee to recommend to city council to set the proposed tax levy rate at $12.50 and hold that special public hearing on April 7th at 5:15. And as always, I know everyone hears me say it, we can always go down. It's the top. It can always go down. And we have a couple chances to do that. I mean, if you have another committee meeting in a couple weeks that you want to, have a different budget, then before we adopt the final budget, it can go down.
And I'll speak to that shortly.
Sure. And we get to the hearing in April, before you do a final vote on the budget in April, you also can reduce the rate. So there are opportunities to do that. But this is what will show up in the letter that goes out. So with that, I guess I'll take questions, or if there's anything else people wish I would have covered.
Thank you, Jen. And I'll jump in to add. So my plan is, from discussions with all of you, is to bring forward at the next committee meeting, we'll have an actual budget discussion. I'll be bringing forward a proposed budget that this is kind of just setting the max. If you guys remember, this was really looking at if we included everything that was essentially discussed through goal setting. We didn't quite include everything that were staff requests. We limited some of those. But I can let you know that the number I plan to bring forward as a recommendation is not the full $12.50. It will be lower than that. For the sake of setting the max, since we're planning to have that discussion for tonight, my thought was, based on conversations, go ahead and leave that where it is. I can tell you I won't be bringing that amount forward, but I know that'll be the discussion at the next committee meeting, is to work through what I'm actually proposing, and then are there some changes, thoughts on that at that point. So that's kind of a new thing we're adding this year. We didn't do last year, was that additional committee meeting to really dig on the numbers and me bring a proposed budget forward. So with that, I'll open it up to discussion.
Mr. Mayor.
Yeah.
Thank you. I know during the recent Board of Supervisors election, there was a lot of talk about changing the EMA financing and so on. Wondering if that's got any teeth in it, what can we expect, savings, if any, and I'm assuming, hopefully savings, or else why would we do it? And then the half of the refund we're putting for a cushion for the next year after, what would that, if we didn't do that, assuming something gets done or just stays the same, what would that change on the levy?
So you're saying if we would use the full refund to help offset?
What was half of it again?
92,000 was half, 184,000 total. It would decrease the rate by about 4 cents, because usually around numbers, about 100,000 reduces the rate by 4 cents.
100.
So an extra 92,000 would be about 4 cents that's going to reduce that.
And then, just if it helps for math through tonight, every about $280,000 is 1% of that total.
Yep.
Increase or decrease.
Of the 1250?
Yeah, so the proposed change, every 1% change up or down is about $280,000.
So like for residential to go from 7% to 6%, it would take about 280,000.
Okay.
So yeah, that's definitely a policy decision to talk about what to do with the refund.
Yep, and then the EMA piece, we are working with the county on that, kind of just getting the details for what it looks like, what's the escrow process. The discussion, the goal would be to make that a county-based levy. It doesn't really open up our general fund, because it is through the EMA levy, not the general levy, but it does at least consolidate it through the county, which is essentially, at this point, it is kind of a county service, but currently all of us as individual cities pay into it, and then they use it to fund the county EMA.
Do we get an idea what fiscal year that would be effective in? Probably 27, maybe?
Yeah, most likely, it would not be this one, just because they're going through the same budget process.
Sure.
So for them to do it now, but that would be the goal, is to get something in place for next year's fiscal budget.
Okay.
Any other discussion from council? Otherwise, look for a motion. Denny, if you could put the back screen, motion to set the 1250 as the max proposed levy that will include in the letters that will go out. And then it'll be setting the public hearing date as April 7th at 5:15 PM.
So moved.
Second.
Motion seconded, and any other discussion from council? Okay, seeing none, any from the public? Okay, also seeing none, this requires a voice vote for this, so all those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion carries.
Okay.
And that is all we have for committee meeting tonight, so we will adjourn back here at 7 PM for the regularly scheduled city council meeting, and thank you everyone for coming.